A red plastic cup. It's a relatively simple object, and not exactly one to get too excited about, usually. You see, for most of my life, I've always been fascinated by patterns. Anything, no matter how rudimentary, can be made complex through repetition. This goes for a point, a line, or any three-dimensional form too. And it's three-dimensional forms that have always captured my attention. These factors affected much of how I went about my adolescence, though perhaps the biggest effect was my decision to collect and stack thousands of cups. I started 6 years ago with 300 cups. And from that 300, I built the foundation for what I do now. In case you're curious, I now have 5,128 cups. While I wasn't even inspired by anyone, I didn't even learn how to stack from someone that was already doing this. In fact, I don't even know if there's anyone else that stacks to quite the extent that I do. And I also never did the speed stacking. That may surprise you, but I don't know. Maybe that's why I ended up taking this particular route. Over the years, I've stacked hundreds of different structures. I've progressed from making single triangles to massive designs that can fill an entire room. The portfolio of what all I've made is certainly interesting, but the true takeaway from this journey hasn't been the impressive stacks. It's the ability to think creatively throughout a process. My first step, not only for each individual stack, but in the larger sense of beginning to cup stack, is assessing my parameters. A cup is a very specific shape. If you think of a cup, that's about like most cups you'll ever see. Using this one particular object does set limits on what I can do. There's only so many different ways that cups can interact with each other. But by stacking cups on their sides, with the rims upright, or by using intricate foundations, I can create new and interesting patterns that offer limitless possibilities. The space in which I stack is also a key player in what I end up making. Where my stacks are located affects how I go about stacking them, and also how they're viewed. If I'm on a stage, I have to be aware if it's made of multiple parts. That way I can ensure stability in the whole form, and through the whole process. The upper limit of my stacks is set by the ceiling of the room I'm in, and the various tables and chairs I can stand on to stack higher. Where my stacks are influences how I interact with them, but then also how an audience or a viewer would perceive them. And to think, all of this went on before I even placed a single cup. But it's essential to know well what you're working with. I still create these amazing things just using cups. But I've learned how best to creatively use the qualities of cups and the space in which I'm stacking. And that's allowed me to continually grow in my craft. Another ever-present step in the process is failure. Now, I've come to the point after about 6 years that I have a fairly steady hand. And it's rare that a whole structure will fall over before I intend it to. That was certainly not always the case, especially in the early stages. I wasn't apprenticed by a master cup stacker. I was self-taught. This meant that I very quickly realized I was working with a somewhat volatile medium. It was either figure out a way to mitigate the falling or succumb to frustration. Through trial and error, I learned that by integrating curves into my designs, I could stabilize the whole form. And so I soon began incorporating those curves and was able to stack much larger structures. Now, not only can stacking be a challenge, but I'm also not always happy with what I end up making. You might think that stacking 2,500 cups is always a win, but I'm not always satisfied. If a form lost its appeal, or it even lost the initial vision that I set out with, then I do my best to learn from that. What went wrong? Was there a particular problem I experienced? Did I not plan enough ahead? I'm sure you've heard, but let me reiterate again, that failure is an excellent teacher. Just because I mess up a stack, or I'm not happy with it, that doesn't mean I'm done. There'll be a next time. And the next time, I can try and remedy my mistakes in innovative ways. I've touched on it slightly already, but problem solving is how I go about making most of my cup discoveries. One such example that has affected many of my more recent structures was the addition of color. So for about 4 years, I stacked only with my red cups. I was thrilled about the idea of adding color, just because that would enable so many more possibilities. Turns out, the particular red cup that I had 3,000 of at the time is very unique. So unique that I've struggled to ever find any other cups that are the same height and different colors. This is a problem. The cups have to be the same height in order to interstack. And while you think a millimeter or two might be fine, that adds up after 20 layers. I scoured dozens of grocery stores with a reference cup for measurement. I even tried painting the cups, but the surface was too glossy. Eventually, after months of brainstorming, I found a solution. I could make sleeves out of other cups. And so I got some blue cups. They're too small to stack directly, and I cut off all the bottoms. They could now be slid over the red, thus creating a blue cup visually, but functionally, it's still the height of the red. This definitely led to a bit more work on my part, but the results were certainly worth it. However, ironically, another problem arose from this solution. How would I go about designing what I was stacking? At first, I tried winging it, and it's not too difficult to think through a letter or two, but I soon found myself ill-prepared for creating the images that I wanted to make. I have to think about the image from the bottom up. This means that an entire cross-section or layer must be placed before moving on. Let's look at a smiley face. If we look at this layer right here, there are approximately 4 cups in that layer that are colored. I have to be sure to place all 4 of those cups before moving onward. And if I forget or I misplace a cup, then I have to unstack and go back through the image to fix it. And that's not always fun. So what I needed was a schematic, a way to diagram the red and blue, and then translate that to a wall of cups. Now, to my knowledge, templates like that aren't exactly in high circulation, and so I had to formulate my own. What I ended up with is what I now use whenever I stack any specific image or word. These maps allow me to translate a known or a specific design, and then display them in cups. Nearly this entire journey has just been one big problem-solving endeavor. If I had stopped when I first encountered a problem, I would either still be stacking 300-cup triangles, or I wouldn't be stacking at all. I think any problem can at least be partially solved. It may take months of brainstorming, many failed ideas, or just barreling ahead until you've made it, but you can always make progress through continually pressing forward and approaching problems from many different angles. Now, you might not think that destroying hours of hard work and a very large structure is something that I would enjoy doing. In fact, I almost always get asked that question, does it physically hurt you when you knock it all down? But really, the impermanence of stacking is an integral part of what I do. Nothing I stack is permanent, and it always comes crashing down. But you know what's awesome? I still have those cups. Logistically, this is very helpful because I haven't needed 250,000 cups. I still have cups from the original 300 that I started with, and they've been stacked in more structures than I can count. Each cup is renewed in every structure that it's in, and each cup has a specific place in every design. Every structure truly is greater than just the sum of its parts, because its parts are just simple pieces of plastic. There's always the potential to make something new, and for growth to occur, even in using the exact same material. Whenever I stack, it takes about 2 hours. And once I'm done, I'll leave the completed structure standing for maybe 20 minutes. And again, once I knock it down, I'll never stack that same thing again. And even if I tried, I don't think I could. Every structure depends on so many different variables. I can't really count on constants. Sometimes the cups are more unstable. Sometimes I'm in a different disposition, and that affects how I stack. And other times, I just make mistakes. I savor every moment that I stack, and that's why I'm not too distraught whenever I knock it all down. In placing a cup, there's a sense of gravity, because the whole structure isn't held together permanently. In placing a cup, it's a finite action, and one that only matters for a brief span of moments. I think there's weight to what is done in the moment, but then there's also always the knowledge that the future can hold greater things. Creativity isn't concrete. Creativity is an ebb and flow of ideas that is constantly being remade. Now, there's one thing that made all of this possible, and that's the fact that I stuck with cup stacking. I'll remind you again that I only started with 300. And it's not like I woke up one morning and had 5,000. I slowly accumulated more over time. But that means that a lot of what I can do now wasn't even possible or even a thought when I first started. I'm grateful for that. As I spent those first 6 months stacking and restacking those same few hundred cups, I began to learn how I could stack. And in order to escape boredom and burning out, I tried new techniques, and I messed around with crazy ideas. By the time my collection increased, I had mastered many ways to stack those same 300 cups. And then when I got more, my options only increased. Even with all those options, I still found time to grow. And because there was always something new to make, I was always invested. And I think that's what's important. The investment of time, energy, and thought, that led me to care and really enjoy what I was doing. If I had started with 5,000 cups, I would have been at a loss with what to do. But starting small allowed me to really develop a passion and foundation for cup stacking. This is my process. Through these steps, I've learned to apply creative thinking to a medium not often used. However, it's not as if these lessons can only be applied to cups. Knowing your material, actively problem solving, learning from failure, embracing temporal relevance, and investing of yourself, that can be practiced in any circumstance. And it's not like you have to stack thousands of cups in order to learn to be creative. I'm under the impression that anyone can be creative. Creativity isn't just limited to the arts. Creativity is an everyday skill that anyone can develop and apply. Thank you.